And now we are recording. We are recording this so that we can post it on our social media pages, and people who are not able to attend tonight will be able to attend. We're able to participate in the presentation. So I welcome all of you. My name is Julie Rio. I am the Assistant Director at the Wallingford Public Library. And the first thing I'd like to do is introduce the new Adult Programming and Community Services Librarian. You will all see there on your screen, hopefully, Leah Farrell. She started just a few weeks ago during this crazy time, and she's been spending the last couple of weeks learning the job, learning the ropes of the library, and we are all very excited that she has joined us. Leah, would you like to say anything?
She's muted, other than that.
No. Oh, she's muted. Okay, never mind. Oh, Leah, I guess you won't be saying anything. So the other thing I wanted to say, oh, so look, I could do this. Oh, I can make myself bigger.
Thank God.
And back up. And I am not actually at the beach, although I wish I were, because I could feel the sands in my toes and the sun on my face. But this is just a virtual background, unfortunately. I wanted to say thank you all for being here to join us for Book Buzz at Home with Cindy Haken. And that is Cindy right there. I'll make her larger when she gets ready to talk. I thank you all for your patience as we learn this new technology and test it out. And what else did I want to say? So please be patient with us. If you would like to submit a question for Cindy, you can use the chat function, which will come to me as the host, and then I will alert Cindy as to any questions that there are. And you can ask questions during the presentation, or you can wait till the end and do it all at once. And so I just want to say a word about Book Buzz. We usually do this at the Wallingford Victorian Inn, where we enjoy libations. I hope you're all enjoying something, whatever you enjoy drinking, and some hors d'oeuvres. And it's become such a popular program in large part because of Cindy. Cindy loves to talk about books, and quite frankly, we all love hearing her talk about books because of her passion for them. She puts a lot of work into the Book Buzz program, the presentation, pouring through dozens and dozens of lists of what books are coming out in the coming months, putting together thousands of those books that are coming out in the coming months, and then culling it down into manageable lists in different genres, which she'll tell you about, and then further and agonizingly so, choosing her list of the 20 notable books that are coming out in the now spring and summer months. I'm not sure if any of those publication dates have changed because of the situation that we're in, but I'm sure she'll address that as well. And I just want to start by myself giving a huge thank you to Cindy for all of the work that she does to put this program together. And I'm going to applaud her. I know you're all applauding her at home, and
Okay.
And she can't see or
Premature.
hear you, but
Premature.
She feels the love. No, it is
right.
not premature, because the work has already been put into this. And for the next hour, she will dazzle you with her knowledge. Not to set the stage, the bar too high, but yeah. Anyway, without any further ado, I give you Cindy Haken, Reader's Advisory Extraordinaire Librarian.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this very experimental new technological way to do Book Buzz. It's a very beautiful Tuesday late afternoon here in New Haven. I hope the weather is nice wherever you are in Wallingford or elsewhere in Connecticut or around the country. we, as Julie said, we run Book Buzz at the Wallingford Victorian Inn, which is across the street from the Wallingford Library, twice a year in March and in September. And each time we talk about a bunch of great books that are coming out over the next several months that are getting a lot of pre-publication buzz. And we offer everybody handouts that look like this. There's 7, and they're grouped by genre. This one that I'm holding, literary fiction and short stories. And this is what they look like on the inside. There are lists of books. Each handout has 59 books. They're in chronological order by publication date, and then in alphabetical order by title for books that are coming out on the same day. You see there's a picture of the cover, the title, the author, the publication date, and a 1-sentence synopsis of each book. And we offer everybody who comes to Book Buzz the chance to take these handouts home. And I'm offering them to you too, even though I can't feed them through the computer. You can email me. I'll give you my email address later, and I can send them to you. So the first handout is literary fiction and short stories. The second one is mysteries and thrillers. That's usually very popular. The third one is popular fiction. That's James Patterson, David Baldacci, Nora Roberts, all the Danielle Steele, all the authors that are sort of guaranteed to be bestsellers when their books come out. And then there's a catch-all fiction handout, other fiction, that's everything else, chick lit, dystopian, fantasy, the beach reads, all that sort of stuff. That's in other fiction. On the nonfiction side, there's biographies and memoirs and essays in this handout, history and politics in this handout, and then another catch-all, other nonfiction, which is super broad and covers, as you might imagine, an incredible array of nonfiction topics. That's in this one. So have all 7 of those. You can have one or none. That's totally up to you. Just email me. My email address is chaiken, CHAIKEN @wallingfordlibrary.org. Tell me what you want, and I will send you any of those.
Cindy,
yes, Julie.
I have just chatted with Janet, and she said that she can put those handouts up on our website for easy viewing.
Wow.
Thank you,
Gold
Janet.
star to Janet. That's great. So we'll have them on the website. I'm happy to hear from any of you too. I have them in PDF form at home, so I can send them to you, but we'll have links on the website, so that'll be easy access for you to them. Thank you, Janet. So from those handouts, so 7 handouts, 59 books in a handout, that's 413 books for those of you, math, quick. And from those handouts, I do this list, which hopefully you're all seeing on your screen right now, the 20 notables. And this handout, everybody gets at the beginning of Book Buzz. And this is the handout that I use to go through and talk about the 20 notable titles. This handout was part of the link that we sent. There was a link to this handout, which is already on the website. We put this up on our website, and there's a link to this in the flyer that advertised this program. So you can get that handout if you don't already have it, or again, you email me and ask for it, and I will send it to you. So I'm going to talk about those 20 time. Each book is I'm just going to talk about it for a couple minutes. If you have a question about a specific book I'm talking about, please put it in the chat, and Julie will interrupt me. If you have broader questions, put those in the chat, and we can talk about those at the end. As Julie said, we cannot have alcohol in the library, but we can have it at the Wallingford Victorian Inn. So part of the reason this program is called Book Buzz is because we drink while we're talking about the books Julie and I are doing. I hope you are all joining me in a drink. It's no fun to drink alone. Depending on how much I drink, the later books could get really interesting. Okay. So, hold on. Hold on, that didn't work. Okay, first technological difficulty because I couldn't share that screen.
This is live.
I know. Let me try again.
It worked perfecly during the rehearsal.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
All right.
That was big. Now everything is downhill. Okay, first book, How to Eat by Mark Bittman and David Katz. If you get your hands on the other nonfiction handout, you will see that there's a lot of books about healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, the best kind of diet, good carbs versus bad carbs. There's a ton of them. And I don't know whether spring leads into bathing suit weather or this is just a hot topic. But I wanted to pick one of those to highlight for you. And this was easy because Mark Bittman is such a beloved name in the cooking world. If you know anything about cooking, you have heard his name. He is the author, first and foremost, of the How to Cook Everything cookbook. It's this massive, big yellow cookbook that in my extensive cookbook collection is the most used. He's written a bunch of other cookbooks. He, for the Times, a cooking column for 20 years. He's super approachable. His whole MO is to make cooking understandable and easy and accessible. And in this book, How to Eat, he's partnered with David Katz, who is a preventive medicine specialist and the founder and founding director of Yale's Prevention Research Center. And they've set this book up in a very, very approachable Q&A style format where they just talk to you and try to anticipate all the questions you have about the right kinds of foods to eat, why they're the right kinds of food, take the mystery out of it, make it easy to understand, and make it something that makes sense to you so that you can maybe adopt a healthy eating lifestyle. This may be relevant now as we're all at home and not moving around so much and eating a lot more, I think, than we usually do. The book came out on March 3rd, and it's doing very well. And so I recommend it. I've looked at it, and it's really fun. So that's the first book, How to Eat by Mark Bittman and David Katz. The second book, if you saw the flyer, this cover will be familiar to you. This was the book I was holding. It seems an appropriate title for this life we're living these days. Laura Zigman is the author of the very first chick novel to come out in the United States. Not the very first chick lit novel ever. That was Bridget Jones' Diary, of course, by Helen Fielding, but the first one written by a U.S. author for a U.S. audience. That called Animal came out in 1997 and was a huge bestseller and turned into a movie starring Ashley Judd and Hugh Jackman, and of other novels that no one has ever heard of. And then she disappeared. She just stopped writing completely. And she has written now new Separation Anxiety, which came out on March 3rd. And it's fantastic. She wrote in a little blurb about it, she said, "I've always written what I call semi-autobiographical fiction, stories based on the sometimes painful, always hilarious stages of life that I and everyone I know was going through. Separation anxiety is where I and everyone I know has been lately." The protagonist in Separation Anxiety is a 50-year-old woman named Judy. She is having an absolutely magnificent midlife crisis. Her marriage is faltering badly. Her teenage son is basically monosyllabic, not speaking to her, non-communicative. She is the once extremely successful author of a children's book and has since not written anything else great. She has a dead-end job. And one day she's in her basement going through boxes where she finds the sling on the cover that was given to her when her son was born, and she puts it on and she picks up her dog and she puts her dog in the baby swing. And anyone who has a dog, especially a dog that would fit into a sling like that, would understand right away why that felt really, really good. She calms down, she feels comforted, and she starts wearing the dog everywhere with her, including places that dogs are not allowed to go. And the book takes us through 4 or 5 months in Judy's life. She falls apart and then sort of gets put back together again. It's very, very funny. It's very, there's some sad stuff in it, but it feels readable. If you are in anywhere around this demographic, I think it will speak to you and appeal to you. And again, that's already out. It came out on March 3rd. Okay, before the third book, This was something I don't usually do in Book Buzz, but I did this time. I gave everyone who was at the Victorian Inn with us this picture. It was taken on an otherwise completely ordinary Tuesday last May in Leicester Square in London. If you don't know the layout of London very well, Leicester Square is just a few blocks from Piccadilly Circus, which is London's version of Times Square. So this is a very, very trafficked area. Tourists, professionals, cars, everyone is in this area. And that was, as you can see from the scope of the picture, a really big billboard. There was no flashing lights, nothing, no scroll across the top, just that sort of woodwork frame you see with that image, the red image, and the words, "Some get up." That was it. Literally, that billboard going up, a tweet went out with the photo of the billboard asking, does this mean what I think it means? That tweet went viral. And the next day, it was announced that the third book in Hilary Mantel's trilogy about Thomas Cromwell would be published this March 10th. That third book is called The Mirror and the Light. So I just want to reflect for 1 second about this idea that you could put a billboard this big in a hugely popular area about a book. That's how big this book release is. The Mirror and the Light finishes a trilogy that Hilary Mantel started in 2009 with Wolf Hall about Thomas Cromwell, who was sort of the consigliere to Henry VIII. Wolf Hall, as I said, was published in 2009. It was a huge bestseller and won the Booker Prize that year. It was followed in 2012 by Bring Up the Bodies, which was also a huge bestseller. Collectively, those two sold over 5 million copies. And it also won the Booker, making Hilary Mantel the first woman to win the Booker for more than one book, and the first author ever to win the Booker for 2 books in the same series. The 2 books were turned into a brilliant BBC miniseries, which was broadcast here on HBO, and which you can watch even from home using our Hoopla digital app, because the library has it. And it also was turned into a stage play that was fantastic. And since 2012, everyone has been waiting for the last book in the trilogy, and here it is. It came out on March 10th. It came out in the UK on March 5th, and the night that it came out, they projected the cover on the Tower of London, where a lot of the action in the books takes place. The lines out the big bookstores were down the block. This was like a Harry Potter publishing event. If you remember last year's big book, The Testament, Atwood's sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, the pre-orders for The Mirror and the Light in the UK were 50% higher than Testaments. That's how big this is. The Guardian said, the trilogy is complete and it is magnificent. The Washington Post said, from the machinations of Henry VIII's powerful advisor, Thomas Cromwell, Mantel has spun one of the most monumental works of historical fiction ever written. This is not faint praise. If you are looking for something to get lost in, if you are fascinated by Henry VIII and his machinations with his wives and want to know about the guy behind the scenes that made it all happen, this is the series for you. Start with Wolf Hall. You need to read these in order. The Mirror and the Light opens right after Anne Boleyn has been beheaded and goes through the rest of Thomas Cromwell's life. You will not be disappointed. And these days, if you need something to just immerse yourself in, this is a great one to do.
Cindy,
okay.
I have a question from
yes.
Kate K.
Okay.
Who wants to know what is the name of the HBO series?
Wolf Hall.
Okay.
It's just called Wolf Hall. Thanks for that question. Easy to find. If you search Wolf Hall in our catalog, one of the things it brings up is the e-video using Hoopla of it, so you can just watch it from home right now. Book 4 is a book that also came out on March 10th. Why Did I Come Into This Room by Joan London. a candid conversation about aging. The title alone should have told you what it was about. Joan London, of course, was the beloved Good Morning America host for 20 years. And she has become something of a priestess about women's wellness issues. She's very direct, she's very candid, and she's very funny. And her new book has a tagline, "I'm too old for Snapchat, but too young for Life Alert," which I think covers a broad range of people, probably a lot of people who are on this call.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, really? Okay. So she tackles all the stuff that people really would like to know, but really don't want to ask about, like wrinkles and age spots, and why we're have such energy than we used to have, and hot flashes, and why we can't sleep through the night, and our memory is starting to go. She takes that on and she interweaves it with the science of aging, the science behind what happens to our bodies and our brain, and gives us some suggestions for how to cope with all this a little bit more easily. Another tagline of the book is the what to expect when you're expecting for the aging process. So she's really nailing all of us. This is a great read. Again, something that's pretty good for right now when we're all looking for some fun stuff and some relatable stuff to pick up. This is out. It came out on March 10th. In the other nonfiction handout, I said earlier that there were a ton of books about healthy eating and healthy lifestyle. There were even more books about climate change, because before there was COVID-19, we were all talking about climate change. And the most notable book from the climate change books that are coming out in the next several months is this one, Our House is on Fire. Greta Thunberg is, of course, the face of climate change. She was Time Magazine's Person of the Year last year. She was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. She has single-handedly galvanized the young generation to make this issue come to the forefront. But when she was 11, in 2014, she's still very young, she started to shut down. She stopped eating, she stopped speaking, she basically went completely inward. And her parents and her younger sister were trying to figure out what was going on, and ultimately realized that she was reacting to her understanding of climate change and what it was doing to the planet. And if that sounds overly dramatic, it's important to realize that she has Asperger's. And if you know anything about that disease, it's not an unusual reaction to something as big and uncontrollable as climate change. And as a family, they decided to take the cause on to help her in the first instance. And this book is a beautifully written book about family coming together to help a member in crisis, and how that became this huge mission of taking on climate change and helping the planet. It's out. It came out on March 17th, and it's terrific. Okay, sometimes books buzz because the author wrote an earlier book that did spectacularly well. That's the case with this book, The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel, which came out on March 24th. In 2014, she wrote a novel called Station 11, which, just for fun, was about a flu pandemic that wiped out a civilization, and the aftermath of that pandemic and what that looked like for the small number of survivors out there. At the time it came out, it was dystopian fiction. I'm not sure it would still be considered dystopian fiction today. Dystopian fiction is not one of my favorite genres, but I read Station 11 because it was getting such good press, and I loved it. And she hasn't written anything since then until now. So there's huge buzz about The Glass Hotel. I think it was on the cover of the Times book review, Sunday book review, a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the 20 most anticipated books of 2020 from the New York Times, from Newsweek, and from the Boston Globe. So this is a big book. It's not dystopic. This one takes on the aftermath of the breakdown of a huge Ponzi scheme. Might also sound familiar. But basically what she does really well is look at how sometimes precariously we rebuild our lives after some sort of major collapse. And in and of itself, that's so relevant to where we are now. And I recommend her Station 11 read if you have a great now for obvious scary right now. And The Glass Hotel is getting terrific, terrific reviews. The next book is A Complete Escapist Present. Anyone who is having trouble reading because they're too worked up with everything that's going on, this would be a really good choice, especially if you are a fan of the Netflix series The Crown or were a fan of Downton Abbey. This is Lady Ing by Anne Glenconner. It came out on March 4th, so you can get your hands on this right away. Lady Anne Glenconner was the oldest daughter of an earl, and she married a baron, Lord Connor. So she said in a recent interview that she actually married down. And she had the most extraordinary, ridiculous life. A lot you would think would be a Downton type of show, except she was maid of honor to Queen Elizabeth, not her wedding, but in her coronation. And she was lady in waiting to Princess Margaret for 30 years. And she was involved, part of all of the stuff that we're now watching, if you're like me, an avid fan of The Crown. She and her husband bought the island of Mustique because why not? And they gave Princess Margaret as a wedding gift the best parcel of land on the island, and they turned it into this paradise, rich and famous. So she writes about that. She writes about all the stuff she did with Princess Margaret. She writes about her proximity to royalty, and she writes about it as if it's normal, because for her it is, but it is extraordinary and sort of unbelievable. This book has been out in the UK for several months and has been on the bestseller list there for almost. I recommend it, especially if you're looking for something to take you out of the here and now. You'll kick out of it. The next book came out last Tuesday is I Want You to Know We're Still Here by Esther Saffron Foer. If you are a reader of literature, Saffron Foer, and you say, why does that name sound so familiar? And the answer is that she is the mother of 3 sons, all of whom are published authors, most notably her middle son, Jonathan, who's written several bestsellers, including Everything is Illuminated and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. So she has literature chops, at least technically. She's not a writer. She worked in PR for a number of years and was the CEO of Sixth and I, which is a DC-based nonprofit center for arts. And she's most notably for this purpose, the daughter of survivors. She grew up with her parents really not talking at all about what happened to them during World War II. Her father died when she was 8. And her mother would occasionally mention some little snippet and then immediately shut down. She never wanted to talk about it. And one day when Esther was in her 40s, her mother mentioned that before she met her father, they met in a displaced persons camp in Poland in 1946 after the war. Her father had been married before and had a daughter, and that first wife and daughter, Esther's half-sister, had been killed in the Holocaust. And that was like a bombshell for Esther Saffron, and she decided that she was somehow going to find out everything she could about that first wife and her lost half-sister. She didn't have names, she didn't have pictures, she just knew the villages that they come from. And she started using genealogical databases. She has distant relatives all over the world, in Ireland and Brazil and throughout the United States. She reached them, pieced together enough to go back to, this was Poland, but it's now Ukraine. She went back there and she found descendants of the family who had hidden her father and saved his life. And through them, she was able to piece together some information about her first wife and her half sister to them. The book is written in very direct, plain, matter-of-fact language. The story she tells is incredibly difficult and hard to read, but ultimately it's a very life-affirming book and a very important book, and I recommend it to you. I read it last week. Okay, now come to books that are just now coming out, that were published just today. The first book is The Benefit of Hindsight by Susan Hill. So I am a huge fan. Sorry for the barking dog.
Is that Lennon?
Yeah, I know. Sorry, real life. Okay. I'll take a pause to drink.
So everyone, that's his dog Lennon, named after John Lennon.
John Lennon.
Sure he's missing his mommy, so that's why he's barking.
That must be why. That must be it. Okay. I'm a big fan of detective mystery series, crime fiction in general, but especially if it's in the form of a series, so that not only do you have a great mystery whodunit detective kind of thing going on, but you also have character development that spans several books. Get to see sort of a life arc of the main characters, and you get to know them as characters apart from the time that's solved in each book. And that's the kind of thing that would be a great thing to do right now. And I've picked this to highlight because Susan Hill is a good author. She's won a ton of awards. She's not only written novels and short stories. She has a play, Black, that's been playing in the West End in London since 1989. So she brings tremendous writing chops to detective crime fiction. And The Benefit of Hindsight is the 10th book in a series she's writing about a detective chief superintendent called Sorelier and his family, who live in this idyllic English town, Lafferton. This is not cozy mystery stuff. The crimes that happen around Lafferton are very, very dark. And Simon and his parents and his sister have complicated lives and are very complicated characters. And the books are riveting. The first one in the series, because I'm a big believer in starting at the beginning of a series, is called The Benefit of Hindsight. I recommend this whole series to you. If you already know it, then, I'm sorry, The Benefit of Hindsight is the first one is Various Haunts of Men. First one is The Various Haunts of Men. The new one is The Benefit of Hindsight. This came out today, and it's a high on my to-read list. Okay, another book that came out today, and really, again, if you're a reader of literary fiction, if I just said, Ann Tyler's got a new novel coming out, that's probably all you would need to know to say, I need to go get it, and I need to read it. But I'll tell you a little bit more about it in case you don't know and love Ann Tyler the way I do. Ann Tyler has written over 20 novels. She is a master of character study, lots of characters, real people living small, good, decent, everyday lives and get by. Breathing Lessons won the Pulitzer Prize. So that's a title that may be familiar to you. The Accidental Tourist, one of my favorites, was turned into a phenomenal movie years ago. Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant is another very popular one. A recent one, The Spool of Blue Thread, was shortlisted for the Booker. She's tremendous. You could pick up almost any one of her novels and enjoy them a great deal. Redhead by the Side of the Road is about a middle-aged man who's living a very, very safe life. He is a self-employed tech expert. He's the superintendent of the building he lives in. And his day-to-day and week-to-week existence is very set and safe, and he likes it that way. He has a girlfriend who he sees sometimes, and everything is just scheduled. And in very short succession, his girlfriend gets evicted and needs to come live with him, and a teenager shows up thinking that he might be this guy's son. And his whole life gets upended. And this novel is about what happens One of the reviews that I read, which I really liked, said, if Tyler's large cast, many faceted novels are symphonies, this portrait of a man imprisoned by his routines is a concerto. The book is under 200 pages, so you could read it in a quiet afternoon, and I suspect it's going to be a huge bestseller. It's also very high on my to-read list, and it came out today. Simon the Fiddler is coming out next Tuesday, the 14th. The first book by Paulette Giles since her phenomenal News of the World, which came out, I think, in 2015, and is being turned, as we speak, into a movie starring Tom Hanks. News of the World was a Thursday night book club. The library runs several book clubs, and one of them is the Thursday night book club. That book club read News of the World last summer, and it was one of the very few books that pretty much every single person in the book club loved. So first, let me say that if you haven't read News of the World, you should. It's about a captain, and it's set in 1870 after the Civil War. The captain is making a living by riding through Texas, stopping in cities and towns there, and reading the newspapers that he brings with him, because that is how people find out what's going on in Texas, in the country, and around the world. And one of the friends he's met in his travels is a fiddler player named Simon and Simon's wife, Doris. We only see them a couple of times in News of the World, but they're very, very charming characters. They're the kind of people you want to know more about. And in Simon the Fiddler, Paulette Giles has given us Simon's backstory of Simon's role in the Civil War and what happened to him, the other musicians he played with during the war, after the war, how he met his wife Doris, how he wooed her. I said it's coming out next Tuesday. I had an advanced reader copy of it, and I read it this weekend. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, really captures what life was like in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War in Texas. Simon is somebody you would want to know. So is Doris. They have some very good people they come across and some not so good people. It's a great, great read. It's coming out next Tuesday, and I really recommend it. Okay, there's one short story collection in the Notable 20. A lot of people, again, I've said this before, have been emailing me and telling me they're having trouble concentrating, that they can't sit still and read a book. And I've been thinking that short stories might be a way back into reading for those people. And this would be a pretty special collection to begin with. If you're looking at this and you're saying, Cindy, Madeleine L'Engle died many, many years ago, how is it that she's coming out with a book? She did, and she is. She is, of course, the beloved award-winning author of A Wrinkle in Time and its sequel, Wind in the Door, along with lots and lots of other books. But she also wrote these stories and put them somewhere in a box. And her granddaughter just discovered them recently, which is like the kind of gift you wish that all your favorite authors who have passed away would leave behind. I'm still hoping we'll get some last writings from some of my beloved authors who passed away. So it's a collection of 18 short stories by an author who I think we probably all read when we were younger and loved. I have not read these. This comes out on April 21st. Many of the stories have never been published before. Others of them may be recognizable because she wrote them and wove them in some of her novels. There's fantasy, there's science fiction, there's realistic stories here. There's something for everyone. It's probably going to be one of the biggest of the year just because so many people have such a soft spot for her and her books. And again, Moment of Tenderness comes out on the 21st. Okay, also coming out on the 21st is another book, a memoir that I think is going to be really big. In March of 2017, if you read the New York Times, even if you don't, you probably came across a article written in the Modern Love column called You May Want to Marry My Husband. It was written by Amy Krauss Rosenthal, who was a best-selling children's author and filmmaker. and she was dying of ovarian cancer. And she wrote this article extolling the virtues of her husband, saying how much she loved him, how fabulous he was, and that she wanted him to find love again. He did not know that she had written the article. And in 10 days after she wrote the article, she passed away, and she never knew what the article did. It went absolutely viral. In 1 week, it had been read 5 million times, and its popularity just continued to increase from there. Her husband, Jason, has written a memoir called My Wife Said You May Want to Marry Me, that talks about how they met, their individual childhoods, when they met, how they fell in love, the 3 children they raised together, and the plans they had for the rest of their lives after their youngest daughter went off to college, which was followed quickly by her diagnosis and everything that happened after that. It's a very candid memoir. I had an advanced reader copy of this one, so I read this a few months ago. He does not hold back the extent of his grief and loss and his struggles with recovering from her, or at least not, if not recovering, then moving on from her death. If for anyone who read her and was touched by that and wants to know how he's doing, for anyone who suffered a similar kind of loss, this is a book for you. And it's getting tremendous pre-publication buzz, so I think it will be a bestseller. Okay.
Cindy,
Yes, Julie.
I just wanted you to clarify for people who may not know what an advanced reader copy is. Because you've mentioned that a couple of times, and I'm just wondering if people are sitting there thinking, well, what does that mean?
So an advanced reader, I wish I had one with me. I would hold it up so you could see it. An advanced reader copy of a book is kind of like a final proof of a book that publishers send out to generate some pre-publication publicity. I've been lucky enough to get to know some library marketing teams of the various publication houses, and I email them when I find out about a book that's coming out if I am desperate to read it. And sometimes they take pity on me and they send it to me. It's a paperback, not 100% final, but close to final version of the book. And I value them tremendously. I've got several advanced copies of books that are coming out in the next few months that I'm trying to take advantage of being at war to read before they come out, so I can tell people about them. Does that answer the question, Julie?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Moving on, Sweet Sorrow by David Nichols. This is coming out May 5th. This is a perfect late spring summer read. This one I read because it's been out in the United Kingdom for months and months and months, and I could not wait for it out here, so I got a copy from it. David Nichols has written 4 other best-selling novels. The one that would probably be most known to you is called One Day, because it was turned into a movie starring Anne Hathaway about a man and a woman who meet on a specific day, and then the book takes you forward every year to where they are at in their relationship each year on that same day. It's a huge bestseller. All of his books have been bestsellers. I personally, having read Sweet Sorrow, think it's his best book. It is about a guy named Charlie Lewis, who the summer after he graduated from high school was in a complete and total rut. His parents had just gotten divorced. His mom and his sister were living elsewhere, and he was living with his dad. So which was a disaster because his dad was completely depressed by the divorce. He had not done well in high school and was sort of at a loss for what to do next. And one day he stumbles across a group of high school students from his high school and the rival high school who have started rehearsals for a summer stock version of Romeo and Juliet. And he immediately develops a crush on the young woman who's playing Juliet. And so he gets involved with the summer stock group just to spend more time with her. And they start dating. The book when Charlie is 38 and getting married to somebody else, not a spoiler. And it goes back and forth between what happened that summer and where he's at now, and his need to make peace with what happened with that summer before he can get married. It so perfectly captures summer romance and first love and what we're struggling with as we're going through changes in our lives. It's terrifically written. It's very, very poignant. I loved it. I've already lent my copy to several people, but I've told them they always have to give it back. This will be a big summer book. It's coming out on March 5th. Okay, I wanted to make sure that the Notable 20s contain books from every single one of the handouts, but when I got to the history and politics handout, that was tricky because I'm trying to avoid, we are saturated with politics, even in the midst of the pandemic when we should be putting politics aside. Politics are part of our everyday. And so it's hard to find books that remind us of that. And this book, that Union, that's coming out on May 5th, may be the kind of book that we all need to read if we want to stay in politics but can't take much more. The subtitle of this book is A Democrat, a Republican, and a Search for Common Ground. And it's written by Jordan Blaszek and Christopher Howe. So Christopher Howe was a speechwriter intern under President Obama, and also was the chief speechwriter for the Secretary of State. In 2015, he started his first year at Yale Law School, where he met another first year, Jordan Blaszek, who had spent 5 years in the Marines doing 2 tours of duty. The two of them could not have come from more different backgrounds, but they became friends very quickly and have stayed close friends ever since. They decided to go on a road trip, and what turned out to be an epic 20,000-mile road trip, visiting 44 of our 50 states and seeing what was going on in the country. They were up in Maine and down in New Orleans. They were at a Trump rally in Arizona. They were in Detroit dealing with the car fallout, and they really hit the touchstones of where this country is at. And they also spent an awful lot of time in the car together talking about the issues that divided the two of them and looking for common ground. And I think that these days, this kind of book is rare, and it's going to speak to a lot of people who are looking to be reminded of the things that connect us as opposed to the things that separate us. So Union is coming out on May 5th. Okay. This book, What Makes a Marriage Last, is also coming out on May 5th. It's by Marla Thomas and Phil Donahue. And I'm hoping that pretty much everyone on this Zoom video conference knows exactly who these two people are. Once upon a time, Phil Donahue was the host of a highly watched and award-winning daytime television talk show. And in 1977, his guest on his talk show was Marla Thomas, who was an award-winning actress and a feminist activist. And they had never met. You can actually find on YouTube the episode, because if you watch it, which I have done, you can watch their growing attraction to each other. It was palpable and visible during the television show and clearly unscripted. They got married a few years later and are still married. And they've put together this book that is comprised of interviews that they had in person with 40 celebrity couples who have been married for a long time, about what makes their marriages work. I haven't been able to get my hands on an early copy of this. I wish I could, but I have seen some photos, and there's pictures of them with the couples. There's pictures of the couples when they were younger and dating. These are couples we all know and have heard about. And the book is, I'm pretty sure, going to be a big delight, especially for those of us who are also been in long marriages and who know these faces in this book. So What Makes a Man Last is coming out on May. I don't have a lot to say about this next book. Again, I've been trying to avoid high political books when I'm picking the 20 notes to discuss with you. However, if this book, The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton, ever actually gets published, it will unquestionably be a bestseller immediately. It was originally scheduled to be published on March 17th. The Trump administration said it contained classified information and couldn't be published. That is still up for discussion and being vetted. Its publication date back to May 12th. Personally, I find it hard to believe that this will actually get published on 12th. So we may be talking about it in the next Book Buzz session. But if you check today, it still has a publication date of May 12th. I'm going to read you the sum total available about this book. This is the blurb. John Bolton served as National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump for 519 days. A seasoned public servant who had previously worked for President Reagan, Bush 41 and Bush 43, Bolton brought to the administration 30 years of experience in international issues and a reputation for blunt talk. In his memoir, he offers a substantive and factual account of his time in the room where it happened. You may recall that once upon a time there were impeachment hearings. Bolton wanted to testify. He was not allowed to testify. This is meant to be in lieu of testimony. If it ever gets published, I'm pretty sure everyone will be reading it. Okay, just a few more to go. I hope you're all bearing with me. The Switch by Beth O'Leary. This is a present from me to you. Beth O'Leary's debut novel, which came out in the United States last year, was called The Flat Chair, and you should go and read it if you're looking for something fun and you haven't read it yet. When she was a few years ago, her then boyfriend, now husband, was he was training to be a doctor, and he was on night shifts, and they basically spent weeks without seeing each other. And she started to figure out what was going on in his day and his week by counting the number of coffee cups she saw, by looking at the food he was eating and not eating, and even, which I love, by looking at whether or not the book he was reading had moved. And that got her thinking about what it is you could know about someone you live with but never see. And so she wrote this book called The Chair about a guy who works nights and has a girlfriend, and so he's away weekends, and a woman who needs a place to live and shares his apartment with him because he works during the day and he works at night. And they never see each other, but they start leaving notes for each other, and a relationship between the two of them develops. Charming. It's very easy to read. I loved it. And I was delighted when I found out that Beth O'Leary was coming out with a new novel called The Switch on June 9th. The Switch is sort of a 2020 version of Freaky Friday. If you remember Freaky from when we were growing up. A young woman who's a workaholic striver in London has sort of a breakdown during a big presentation. She's totally burnt out, and her company tells her to take a 2-month sabbatical and rest. She goes to visit her grandmother, who lives in a little cottage in the countryside, and her grandmother, who's 80 and not feeling so great about things, decides to go live in her granddaughter's apartment in London. And each one of them sort of steps into the other's lives, and you can kind of imagine how that might get weird very fast. So that's what The Switch is about. It's coming out on June 9th, and I can't wait to read it. Two more. So there's this thing that's developed several years where the estates of authors who have died, hire writers to keep writing books in the style of the deceased author. The best example, Ludlum, who, when I was growing up, wrote these phenomenal spy thrillers that I adored. He died many, many years ago. But if you search for new books by Robert Ludlum, for example, Identity is a huge Robert Ludlum bestseller. But a few years ago came out called Born Nemesis, and it says Robert Ludlum, the Born Nemesis, but he didn't write the Born Nemesis. This other guy named Eric Van Lustbetter, whoever it is, wrote it in the Robert Ludlum style. So that's become sort of a popular thing. Tom Clancy's done the same thing. In the past years, astonishingly, Agatha Christie's estate has hired Sophie Hannah to write Agatha Christie mysteries. Sophie Hannah is a very well-known author. She's written many, many psychological thrillers. And now, in August, the fourth Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot mystery is coming out. And if you are an Agatha Christie fan, which I am, you will definitely want to read these books. They read just like as if Agatha Christie wrote them. And they're terrific. The first one, this one, you don't have to read them in order, but there's a little bit of development, so it would make sense to read them in order. The Monogram Murders, The Killings at Kingfisher Hill is the fourth book. Again, it's coming out August 4th. It reads just like an Agatha Christie. You've summoned state where the owner of the estate's brother has been killed, and the owner's fiancé is being framed for murder. While he's on his way, something weird happens in the luxury passenger coach that he's traveling in that has reverberations. It's just like something Agatha Christie would have written. The series is great fun. And so this one, I'm really looking forward to. It'll be out on August 4th. Last book, and probably, to be honest, of all 20, the one that I'm most looking forward to, except maybe The Mirror and the Light.
I was just about to say, not The Mirror and the Light.
So
we've been talking about that for months.
I saved it, except for The Mirror and the Light. In 2015, a woman named Helen MacDonald, that no one had ever heard of, who was teaching at Oxford University and was a nature writer, wrote a book called H is for Hawk. H is for Hawk is about her grief. It's nonfiction. Her grief at the sudden and unexpected death of her father, and her desire, while in the throes of that grief, to get and train a goshawk, an animal that is not trainable. It blew me away. I've thought about this, and I mean it when I say it's one of the best nonfiction books I have ever read. It was on the top 10 lists of the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the Chicago Tribune, and 10 or 15 other major book publications for that year. And I have been waiting since then for her to write something else. Vesper Flights, which is coming out on August 11th, is an essay collection. I've seen the beginnings of the first essay, and I can tell you that her writing is just as strong. Her prose is so raw and so real and so powerful. She writes about topics that I would never have thought about, and then she makes them fascinating. In Vesper Flights, she writes about watching songbirds migrate from the top of the Empire State Building. She writes about seeing tens of thousands of cranes in Hungary, and all these other experiences of wildlife, and how watching wildlife can provide us with guidance and also with comfort. But it's more that she's just an extraordinary writer. And so I honestly cannot wait for this book to come out. And I recommend H is for Hawk if you haven't read it, and you should keep an eye out for Vesper Flights when it comes out on August 11th. And that is the 20 notables for Book Buzz over Zoom.
Yay! Woo! Oh, I see many people clapping because, well, you know, we know you, we see you every day at the library, and we know what a joy it is to hear you talk about books, because not only are you so passionate about reading, you do a lot of it.
Yes. I do.
Quite frankly, it puts all of your coworkers in awe about how much you read. And I'm hearing some bravos from the chat room that people were very fascinated by your talk and interested in all the books that you were talking about. So does anybody have any questions for Cindy? You can use the chat function to send me, the host, any questions you have. Any last words from you, Cindy?
I just want to say again that I know this is a difficult time, really for all of us. We're all experiencing this in different ways. I have personally found reading to be a tremendous calming and comforting influence. I get when people tell me that they're having trouble concentrating enough to read. I have paced around my house looking at the piles of unread books and not been able to, to sit down and start any. But when I find a book that speaks to me and I start to read it, it really, really takes me out of the present and it calms me down. So hopefully some of these titles will help you do that. Again, my email address is chaken@wallingfordlibrary.org. Email me if you want the handouts and you can't find them on our website easily, or if you just want some reading suggestions, I'm happy to give them.
So there are lots of people saying thank you because they now have their reading list for the next several weeks and perhaps months, and saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And there's a question from Barbara in the audience. She wants to know, what are you reading now? Right now. And thank you for cutting into your reading time to present us with this list.
I actually, just to stay calm today, because Julie knows that I was pretty nervous about doing this. I finished reading a book that I don't think is out in the US yet, called Around the World in 80 Trains, believe it or not, about this woman who had written a book that is out in the US called Around India on a Train, who traveled all around India alone by train and wrote about it. And this is her newer book. She literally started in London, went through Europe and Russia, then down to China and Japan, and then flew to Canada, took a train across Canada, then down to New York, down to New Orleans, LA, back to Chicago, Vancouver, and then back to the Far East and through the Far East back to London. It was insane. Her fiance, who's now her husband, went with her. How they survived that. It took 7 months, and it was literally 80 trains. Some of the train rides were 11 days long. It was fascinating, absolutely fascinating to read. So I just finished it, and I haven't decided what to start next.
And someone said, thank you for streaming this. So we have to thank the Wallingford Public Library
100%.
for the capability to do this. And if any of your friends missed it, we will be posting the link, I assume, on our website and on our social media, so that people who were not able to attend tonight can watch the presentation. And so somebody's asking, somebody wished you a happy Passover.
Thank you.
Lots of people saying thank you. And somebody asking about your Thursday night book group, and what that's all about, and if you're planning to Zoom with the book group at all.
So the library has a mystery book club, a nonfiction book club, a YA book club, a classics book club, and the Thursday night book club, which is literary fiction.
Did you say the mystery book group too?
I did. It was first set.
Sorry.
First one. Meet the third Thursday of every month. We're a great group of people who love to read and who are pretty comfortable expressing their views and sharing. We sit in a circle, we have some coffee and some dessert, and we talk about the book of the month. I have been thinking a lot about trying to use Zoom so that we can keep meeting during this period of self-isolation. I just want to make sure that it will function where we can really all see each other and talk to each other. It's not like this where I don't talk so much and I want everyone else to talk. And I just want to make sure that Zoom will allow that. And if I get, I mean, a lot of people have asked and I miss seeing everybody. So we'll probably try to figure out some way to do it.
Excellent. Cindy, I thank you very, very much for all of your hard work and for your enthusiasm. And I thank everyone for joining us tonight. And stay tuned for more virtual programs for adults from the Wallingford Public Library. Thanks all very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.